The year was 2125, and the galaxy was on the edge of war. For centuries, the various alien species had fought, conquered, and crushed each other, each believing that their civilization was the most powerful. But after decades of brutal conflicts, the idea of peace had finally begun to take shape. A universal peace summit had been organized, and representatives from every major species in the galaxy were to meet on the neutral planet of Trifle Prime. It was an event unlike any other in galactic history. The galaxy's leaders stood in the grand hall of the summit, their faces serious, their voices low as they discussed the terms. The stakes were high, and they all knew it. If the talks went well, the endless wars that had ravaged their civilizations could come to an end. But if the peace failed, the fighting would intensify beyond anyone's control. Among the species attending the summit, one stood out: the humans. They were a relatively young species in galactic terms, having only reached space travel a few hundred years ago. Yet in that short time, they had already become one of the most influential powers in the galaxy. Their rapid technological advancements and adaptability had earned them respect, but also fear. The other species knew that humans had a unique quality, something that set them apart. They could fight, but they could also survive like no other. As the talks began, all eyes were on the human delegation. The room was filled with representatives from the powerful alien races: the tall, regal Nimrics with their telepathic abilities, the ancient and wise Vorthians, and the aggressive, war-hardened Krath. But it was the humans who captured everyone's attention. They had been invited to these talks because, in the eyes of the galaxy, they were the most unpredictable species. The human ambassador, a tall figure named Michael Hart, stood confidently at the podium. He was known for his calm demeanor, but there was something unsettling about him. His eyes, sharp and focused, gave off an impression of someone who saw things others could not. As he addressed the assembly, his voice echoed through the hall, cool and unwavering. "We come here today, not as conquerors, but as survivors," Michael began, his words simple but powerful. "We offer peace because we know the cost of war. We've seen it, we've lived through it, and we believe in the possibility of a better future." The other species listened intently, their eyes fixed on him. Some felt hope stir in their hearts, while others were skeptical. The Nimrics exchanged glances, their thoughts shared telepathically. The Krath, however, looked suspicious. They were a warlike race, used to power and dominance, and they didn't trust the humans' motives. "We are willing to offer you a chance," Michael continued, his voice steady. "But this peace must be built on mutual respect. We are not asking you to give up your ways of life, but we are asking you to put down your weapons to stop the endless fighting. We believe the galaxy deserves something better." The room was quiet. For a moment, there was only the hum of the cooling systems in the walls, the faint sound of distant voices filtering in from outside. It was a moment of stillness, one where every species in the room seemed to hold their breath, waiting for the next move. Then the Vorthian representative stood. His name was Orak, a being of ancient wisdom, his body covered in smooth silver-blue skin. His eyes, black as space itself, glimmered with knowledge and age. "And if we agree to these terms," Orak asked, his voice deep and resonant, "what assurance do we have that humans will not betray us? Your history is full of conflict. Why should we believe you?" Michael didn't flinch. His gaze met Orak's, and for a moment, the two seemed to stare into each other's souls. Then Michael spoke again, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. "Because we have nothing left to prove," he said simply. "We have fought enough wars. The galaxy is tired of bloodshed. But if it comes to that, we will not back down. Our kind has survived worse. We will survive whatever challenge you throw at us." The tension in the room grew thicker. The Krath representative, a large, muscular figure with a face twisted in a permanent snarl, leaned forward, his voice harsh. "You speak of survival, human. But survival isn't the same as peace. Peace is weakness. You'll learn that soon enough." Michael's expression remained unchanged. He turned to face the Krath, but he didn't engage in their warlike tone. Instead, he simply nodded, acknowledging the challenge without responding. The room fell silent once again. But this time, it wasn't just the calm before the storm. It was the calm that comes before a decision. The galaxy was standing at a crossroads, and no one could predict what would happen next. The human ambassador's words had struck a chord with many in the room. The offer of peace was tempting, but the uncertainty of human intentions weighed heavily. As the summit continued, the question remained: could the galaxy trust the humans, or had they underestimated what these seemingly peaceful beings were truly capable of? For now, though, the talks continued, with a sense of unease in the air. The delegates knew something was shifting, but no one could yet see the full picture. Would the humans be the key to a new era of peace, or had the galaxy just unknowingly poked the wrong beast? The summit continued under a heavy atmosphere, a sense of discomfort hanging in the air. The peaceful tone that had started the meeting began to erode as the discussions grew more intense. The galaxy's leaders, once hopeful, began to question the true intentions of the humans. As the human delegation stood quietly in their corner of the room, it was clear something was off. The calm, confident demeanor of Michael Hart, their ambassador, hadn't changed, but there was an undeniable shift in the air. The other species, once so eager to negotiate, now found themselves unsure. Whispers spread through the room as delegates exchanged uneasy looks. Human representatives had offered peace, yes, but had they truly intended to follow through? Or was this all part of some greater strategy? It was impossible to say for sure, but it was becoming evident that the galaxy's understanding of humans was far from complete. The discussions continued, but each passing hour seemed to widen the gap between cooperation and suspicion. At one point, the Krath leader, Sylar, leaned forward, his eyes narrowing at the humans. "You ask for peace," Sylar began, his voice low but biting. "But your methods have always been driven by an instinct to survive, not cooperate. The galaxy knows that humans are survivors. But are you capable of more?" Michael Hart, standing tall and composed, answered without hesitation. "Survival isn't a weakness. It's a strength. And in this galaxy, it's the most valuable trait we can offer." The words hung in the air, and the galaxy's representatives exchanged uncertain glances. The Nimrics, telepathic and often perceptive beyond words, began to question if they were truly seeing the full picture. What was behind the humans' calm exterior? What were they hiding, if anything? Then, without warning, the unexpected happened. Michael Hart, after a brief pause, calmly announced that the human delegation was pulling out of the peace talks. The words cut through the room like a sharp breeze, leaving a stunned silence in their wake. For a moment, no one spoke. The representatives looked around, as if waiting for someone to speak up, to challenge the decision. But no one did. The Nimrics' telepathic minds buzzed with confusion, while the Vorthians exchanged deep, knowing looks. The Krath snarled, their distrust growing. Michael's voice echoed through the silence. "We came here to offer peace, but we will not beg for it. If you cannot see the value in it, then we leave. The choice is yours, but you should know that this moment will not come again." A ripple of disbelief passed through the delegates. How could the humans, who had so eagerly sought peace, suddenly turn their backs on it? The decision was unexpected, and it left the other species reeling. The leaders began to murmur among themselves, realizing that the humans they had once underestimated were now in control of the situation. As the humans prepared to leave, something shifted within the galaxy. The representatives from each species began to reconsider their positions. Perhaps humans were not the peaceful beings they had imagined. Perhaps, in retreating from the talks, the humans had revealed something much more significant. They were a force unlike any the galaxy had seen before, and they were not willing to simply fall in line with the demands of others. Outside the hall, The world of Trithel Prime seemed quieter now, the weight of the decision settling into the minds of all who had witnessed the shift. Peace talks had begun with hope and promise. But now, in the blink of an eye, they had turned into something far more uncertain. The humans had shown they were not afraid to walk away when they saw no future in the discussion. And now, the galaxy was left to wonder. Had they just lost their chance at peace? In the midst of it all, the human delegation stood firm, their decision made, their course clear. There was no turning back. And as they prepared to leave, one question lingered in the air. What had the galaxy truly provoked, and how would they face the consequences of underestimating the humans? The galaxy was still reeling from the humans' unexpected decision to pull out of the peace talks. No one had anticipated such a bold move. As the humans prepared to leave, the room was filled with a tense, charged silence. The delegates who had once been hopeful were now unsure, their plans shattered in an instant. Back on Earth, the human leaders were already in motion. The retreat from peace talks wasn't a sign of surrender. It was a calculated move. The human delegation, led by Michael Hart, had only shown a glimpse of their true nature. The galaxy had underestimated them, and now they were about to learn a lesson the hard way. Behind closed doors, humans were making preparations. The galaxy had no idea what was coming, but the humans had anticipated this moment for years. Their retreat wasn't a defeat. It was a strategy to show the galaxy just how wrong they had been. No one had seen the full strength of humanity, but that was about to change. Michael Hart stood by the communications table, speaking with the leaders back on Earth. The humans had waited for this moment, and they knew exactly what they needed to do next. There was no turning back now. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, leaders from the alien species watched as the human delegation departed the summit. The news spread like wildfire. It wasn't just the withdrawal that shocked them. It was the confidence in the humans' eyes, the way they left without hesitation, as though they had already won. The galaxy was beginning to realize that the humans weren't simply playing by different rules. They were rewriting the rules altogether. In the quiet corners of the galaxy, there were whispers of what might come next. The Nimrics, always cautious, began to debate among themselves. Were the humans truly this powerful? The Vorthians, with their centuries of wisdom, began to see the bigger picture. Could this be part of a larger plan, one they had failed to understand? The Krath, driven by pride and aggression, refused to believe it. They would never back down, and they would never let the humans gain the upper hand. But even they knew something had changed. The humans weren't like the others. They weren't a species that could be easily pushed around. Back on Earth, preparations began in earnest. The human fleet, which had been quietly building in secret, was ready for whatever the galaxy had in store. The galaxy might have thought they had called the shots in the past, but now, for the first time in history, the humans were setting the terms. No longer would they be content to sit at the table and beg for peace. They would fight for it, if necessary. And they would fight in ways the galaxy had never seen before. The galaxy's leaders might have been ready to move on to the next diplomatic effort, assuming that the humans would be out of the picture. But they couldn't have been more wrong. Humanity's retreat from the peace talks was only the beginning. What the galaxy didn't realize was that the humans weren't just retreating. They were preparing. And when the time came, the galaxy would face the truth of what they had provoked. The silence following the humans' abrupt withdrawal from the peace talks felt like a weight on the galaxy. News of their departure spread quickly, and within days, every corner of the galaxy was buzzing with speculation. What were the humans planning? Why had they walked away from what seemed like a golden opportunity for peace? The galaxy's leaders were divided, some believing the humans had made a mistake, others secretly afraid that they had just triggered something far more complex than they could comprehend. In the midst of this uncertainty, the humans were quietly moving forward with their plans. Back on Earth, the human fleet, previously a mere rumor in the galactic undercurrents, as the days passed, the galaxy's leaders began to feel a sense of unease they could not shake. The humans, once thought to be simple survivors, had demonstrated something far more complex. Their subtle yet strategic move had shifted the balance of power in ways no one had expected. The planet, once dismissed as insignificant, was now under human control. And with it came something the galaxy hadn't anticipated: a quiet but unyielding influence. The Nimrics, with their telepathic abilities, tried to probe the situation, seeking to understand the humans' true intentions. But the more they reached, the more they realized there was no simple answer. The humans weren't interested in dominating the galaxy. They weren't trying to force the other species into submission. Instead, they were quietly positioning themselves to be the glue that held everything together. In a galaxy fractured by centuries of conflict, humanity was offering something far more powerful than any fleet or weapon: stability. The Vorthians, who had once viewed themselves as the wise and ancient rulers of galactic affairs, found themselves questioning their place in the galaxy. They had seen civilizations rise and fall, but the humans were different. They didn't rely on tradition or raw power. They relied on adaptability and ingenuity. As the Vorthians exchanged their concerns in the halls of their great libraries, they realized they had overlooked the one thing that made humans truly dangerous: their ability to evolve. Meanwhile, the Krath, ever aggressive and proud, could not accept the idea that a young, relatively unknown species had managed to outmaneuver them. The Krath leaders met in private, discussing their next moves. They were not ready to back down, not yet. But even they couldn't deny that the humans had made their first move, and it had been brilliant. There was something in the humans' restraint, something in their refusal to engage in the same endless cycle of warfare that defined other species, that set them apart. Across the galaxy, the diplomatic channels that had once been bustling with activity began to slow. The peace talks that had seemed so promising just weeks ago now seemed like a distant memory. The galaxy's leaders had begun to realize they were no longer in control of the narrative. The humans, by simply standing back and allowing others to make their own mistakes, had taken the upper hand without firing a single shot. And as the months wore on, it became clear that the humans weren't just waiting for the galaxy to come to them. They were quietly reshaping the way diplomacy was conducted. Instead of relying on endless negotiations or the threat of war, the humans had found a new way to influence the galaxy. Through patience, through trust, and through the simple understanding that in a universe full of chaos, stability was the most valuable commodity. The Krath, however, could not let go of their pride. They continued to push forward, challenging humanity's actions at every turn. They began to rally other species to their cause, trying to paint the humans as opportunists. But even their most vocal allies were starting to hesitate. The Nimrics, once the most skeptical of the humans, were now starting to see the value in their approach. The Vorthians, too, began to consider the long-term implications of humanity's strategy. Slowly, but surely, the humans' influence began to spread. More species started to seek out their counsel, not because they feared them, but because they saw in them something they didn't have: a steady hand in a galaxy full of uncertainty. The humans were offering a way forward, one that didn't rely on constant war or diplomacy that led nowhere. And so, the galaxy found itself at a crossroads. The question was no longer whether humanity would be a player in the galaxy's future, but what role they would play. The galaxy had poked the wrong beast, and now they were learning that the humans' true strength didn't lie in their ability to fight. It lay in their ability to reshape the very foundation of how the galaxy operated. The power of influence, the power of patience, and the power of a species that had learned from its past mistakes. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity's quiet strength was the force that could change everything. As the months passed, the galaxy found itself in a state of quiet reflection. Humanity had not only survived, but had quietly, yet profoundly, altered the course of galactic events. The humans' initial withdrawal from the peace talks had been misunderstood. What was seen as a retreat was now understood as a strategic pause, an opportunity for the galaxy to reassess its approach to the newcomers. And in that pause, humanity had quietly set the stage for a new kind of influence. The Krath, despite their pride, were beginning to feel the weight of their decisions. They had tried to rally the galaxy against the humans, but the more they pushed, the more isolated they became. The Nimrics, who once viewed the humans with suspicion, began to communicate with them more openly. Their telepathic capabilities allowed them to understand something others could not. The humans were not interested in power for the sake of dominance. They were interested in creating a lasting, meaningful change. The Vorthians, with their centuries of wisdom, had been slow to embrace the humans' methods. But as time passed, they too began to see the brilliance of humanity's approach. While other species were mired in conflict and bureaucracy, the humans were creating something that had never existed before, a framework for cooperation that didn't require constant negotiation, a framework built on mutual respect and shared survival. The galaxy's ancient powers were finally beginning to recognize that humanity was not just another species vying for control. They were a species capable of leading the galaxy into a new era. Diplomatic discussions, once tense and filled with hidden agendas, began to shift. The humans were no longer viewed as outsiders. They were seen as leaders, quiet leaders, but leaders nonetheless. The galaxy was starting to realize that the humans had something the others lacked: a unique ability to unite disparate groups under a single purpose. They didn't force alliances or demand respect. They earned it. Their resilience, their adaptability, their unwavering commitment to survival had earned them a place at the table. As the discussions continued, a new sense of hope began to form. The galaxy's leaders, once divided and distrustful, began to see that the humans had a different kind of strength. They didn't rely on military power or ancient alliances. Instead, they relied on cooperation, compromise, and the ability to see the long-term picture. Humanity had shown that even in the most challenging circumstances, they could thrive without resorting to force. The Krath, realizing they could not win the support of the galaxy through aggression, began to reconsider their position. They were forced to acknowledge that the humans had something far more powerful than brute strength: the power to inspire change without ever raising a weapon. The galaxy, once filled with rivalry and mistrust, was beginning to see that humanity's role wasn't just to survive. It was to help the entire galaxy survive and thrive together. And as the final rounds of peace talks approached, the message was clear. The galaxy had learned that it had underestimated humanity, not because of their physical might, but because of their capacity for unity, innovation, and vision. The humans were no longer a species that could be ignored or dismissed. They were the force that had quietly reshaped the balance of power in the galaxy, not with fleets or weapons, but with a philosophy that had never been fully embraced before: collaboration and understanding. The galaxy had poked the wrong beast. And now, as the humans continued to solidify their position, it was clear that they weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to create a galaxy where every species could find a place to thrive. The new era was dawning, and humanity was leading the way.